Hey, everybody. So thank you very much for coming today. I'm very happy to have these two very highly esteemed guests in the AI space. We'd like to get a feel just for how much knowledge there is in the audience around AI. So who feels that they have a good understanding of what AI is? So that's not bad, maybe a fifth of you. Yeah. Who has used ChatGPT? Pretty much everybody. Who has used ChatGPT this weekend to write a love letter to their wife that made her cry? I won't say who it was, but you can find out later at the drinks. There's one person in this room. Okay, so let me come over here and let's start, guys, with some intros, basically. I think it's important to go quite far back because I think the world has kind of caught up with you guys a little bit. It's not a recent thing. So Armando, maybe you want to start.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Well, I mean, I pretty much started my career in AI 20 years ago, right out of college. I haven't really done anything else other than focus on natural language processing and developing technologies that today seem to be quite exciting and interesting. I'm American from San Diego, California, but I've been living in Europe for about 25 years. And my company, RavenPack, is based out of Spain, in the south of Spain, where 20 years ago it was kind of weird to have a technology company in the south of Spain, and now it's trendy. We have about 200 people working on the AI natural language problem for financial companies that are looking to generate alpha or better manage risk through the use of these techniques.
And so, interestingly, your customers, because we talked about this on the phone, your customers are not people.
That's a good point. So the ones that pay the bills are, but the ones that actually leverage what we do are models, right? So these are effectively what we call quantitative investing models. Financial engineers build models that take into account multiple factors to make investment decisions. And we were probably the first company to actually sell what is now known as an alternative data product for quantitative investing. So by alternative, meaning that most clients have relied on fundamental data and market data, probably like you guys, right? You use that information every day to make any type of investment decisions. But when we talk about quants, they started thinking about other factors that could help them get an edge. And these financial engineers build these models that effectively try to measure things like sentiment or behavioral aspects within credit card transactions, news, filings, any type of written word that might give them an edge. So yeah, my customers are quantitative models, right? At the end, we feed them data directly through an API, and these models stay up to date with the world based on a systematic process.
Okay, cool. Andrew? Your background?
Started life in the UK after 13, from the northeast of England originally. After 13 years in London, I did my Brexit on my own in the mid-90s. Moved to Germany, briefly Saarbrücken and then Berlin, and worked in a number of research areas in AI, and then founded a company there. We were laughing because we both had the experience that when we started 20 years ago, we didn't talk about it being AI or anything similar because no one knew what that meant, or they maybe thought about robotics, but certainly not anything to do with language or related. So we gradually, like I think a lot of companies that had been established in that space, came out in 2017, 2018, and suddenly had to rebrand ourselves as an AI company. And we do AI as well, by the way. Yeah, we founded a company in Berlin. Again, there was no tech in Berlin when we were in Berlin when we started. Seen that whole mushroom, but the industry around natural language processing has really taken off in an astonishing way in the last 5-6 years, accelerated by various technology approaches. Yeah, what we were doing was more on the on the people-facing side of it, in the sense that we helped the biggest companies in the world, including all the big tech companies. We used to say we sell AI to AI companies. Google and Facebook and Microsoft and others were customers, are still customers of Acrolinx. I say were past tense because I'm no longer working with Acrolinx, but we work with the biggest brands in the world, Siemens and Philips and all those companies, helping them create content, customer-facing content that works better. And again, AI is a, as you can imagine, is a critical part of that puzzle.
Okay, great. So obviously, so much has changed just recently, but obviously you guys have been in the space for many, many years, so it's been a lot more gradual. But maybe we could start by just bringing everyone up to speed with just what has happened over the last few months. Obviously, ChatGPT is the face of it, but what's happened? And we also talked about we should just define what AI is. This isn't a mechanical human, right? This is NLP. So maybe Andrew, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think. So I think first of all, it's important to say that this is not. This is nowhere nearly human. The approach that's currently being taken to develop this really exciting technology is fundamentally very, very simple at its core. And it's not something that's going to get consciousness or going to get intentions or emotions or plans of its own and take over the world, etc. anytime soon. This approach, although it's very interesting, is acknowledged even by those in the field who've invented and been driving this, is acknowledged as something which will ultimately be superseded by something else. But this approach is limited.
And this approach is...
So this approach is basically around getting very, very large amounts of data and applying different methods for learning from that data. And what it again gets very, very good at is fundamentally predicting the next word or filling in gaps in words. And that gives you the ability to create flowing text, which seems like it's written by a person, very similar to what would have been written by a person, because what it's basically learned is what millions and millions of people have written. So the trick is really, it's almost like a party trick, right? It's learned billions of words, and now it can create texts, realistic texts on demand based on what's prompted that seem like plausible answers or plausible responses to that text. But there is, I can't overemphasize how little like intellectual effort. There's no brain work going on inside there other than calling up a bunch of probabilities of what the next word is, and then evaluating which responses is likely to be the most likely. So I would play down a little bit that, although I think we'll come to the risks and that side of it later, I wouldn't want to play down the risks of this, but I wouldn't want to play up the AI is about to take over the world thing.
And so under this approach then, Armando, what are the possibilities of what this approach can get to? What do you see coming through?
Sure. I mean, if I may just expand your polling a little bit and get a raise of hands of those that actually use AI to perform their jobs today. Maybe a raise of hands. It seems like maybe a fourth, maybe less than that. And how many of you think that your job will be replaced by an AI in the future? So even less.
Hoping.
Okay. So
hoping.
So a very small portion of the audience is not using AI today, and a very small portion of the audience believes that AI will not replace their jobs, and I think you're all wrong, right? And I'll try to explain. So first of all, it's becoming very, very evident that when it comes to productivity tools, if you're using Word or you're using Excel or using Gmail or email or any type of tool, which you are, right? We are at a point where we can use AI to write better. And if you write better, you can sell better, you can forge relationships better, you can look better in front of your peers, in front of your customers, in front of your audience, even when you're writing a speech, right? You're going to do better. So if you're not using those tools, someone will, and they will perform better, right? So we're we're at a state where these tools in language can help us be more efficient and more productive. And many people will not understand that for a long, long time. But many are. And those that do will be able to perform better in their jobs every day and make themselves less likely to become redundant in the short term. But there will be a large portion of the population that will effectively say, no, I think AI is evil, and no, I think AI is bad, and governments should prevent its use and its training and its development, and they will live in denial for a very, very long time until their jobs become replaced by a robot, right? I think that's the ultimate scenario, especially when it comes to knowledge workers, right? And it's harder to think of our jobs today as there's nobody better than I can. I have experience, and I have knowledge, and I have relationships, and I have amassed all this value add, right? But we are at an age of disruption today where AI, I think, will truly convert this process into a bullet train, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think understanding the implications that it has in our jobs, right, is the beginning of understanding what AI is all about.
Yeah, and we can go on to that point, actually. I thought one thing you guys mentioned on the call the other day that was interesting was that it actually levels the playing fields for bigger organizations, or for smaller organizations via the bigger organizations, so the Goldmans and the Morgan Stanleys that produce beautiful research material. Well, smaller organizations can now do that as well, right?
Yeah.
As easily.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure we've all been in a situation where someone sends you something, an email, and it's poorly written, right? It's not in native English in the business world. And you'd be like, this person doesn't really understand it just because of the way it was written. But you take that away, and someone that has the right thoughts, the right idea, the right message, uses some AI to formulate a better proposal and a better looking PowerPoint. And that will produce the same conveying message that a tier 1 firm would have done for you, right? Yeah. So I think it really does level the playing field for many small and mid-sized organizations where language was an impediment, but now it isn't, right? In the next 3 to 6 months, you will have AI and what we call NLP, natural language processing technologies, in every productivity tool. You're already using Microsoft Office, or you're using Google Suite, or any of these tools. It'll be there, so everyone will have that opportunity to leverage the inspiration and idea generation that these tools produce.
Okay. And trying to stay on the positive side of things, because it's very easy to get sucked into the inherent fear. No, we are.
That was
you being positive. With staying with that, over the next 2 or 3 years then, both of you, where do you see things going from this point in a very shorter time frame?
I think that, I take a slightly different view, I think, to Armando on this, that I think of the AI more as a collaborative agent in the process. So we will work with AI. I think you've kind of said that as well, but I don't think of it, it will certainly replace a lot of very mundane jobs, or at least the mundane aspects of those jobs. But it's actually much more interesting to think of it as a collaborative tool that you have, as an agent that you have that you can use to be better at what you do. So I usually say, someone has said this on Twitter, and I've quoted it a lot, that AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will take your job. And I think that collaborative approach is one that will come very, very quickly, not just in tools that help you use spreadsheets and word processors better, but in terms of brainstorming and actually the so-called creative part of the process as well is increasingly the tools are getting useful at that part of it as well. And I spoke to a couple of people already who've created business plans or marketing strategy plans with ChatGPT or something similar. It's already encroaching on that process and accelerating it and enriching it and opening up to more people. I think that all of those things are largely positive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When it comes to jobs, obviously there was a report out this week about the Goldmans. We're talking about 300 million jobs. Looking further into the future, I know you both slightly disagree on what the impact could be. Armando, maybe you want to start with your prediction.
I mean, I know it's a very emotional time, right? Because we all have mixed feelings about what this thing is, and especially when our jobs are threatened, right? So I do think that there are some jobs that are very clearly becoming redundant in the next 6 months, 6 to 12 months. Interpreters, translators, right? Many writing jobs, authors, journalists, right? Those are going to go away very, very fast. And And it's going to spread into the legal domain, and it'll spread into, especially in engineering and computer science, right? We're already using AI to write better software, and we're using AI to write low-level code that we used to pay, maybe 50 to 60,000 a year. In some countries, you'd pay 50 to 100,000 a year per expert, which can now be done by an AI. So there are some areas where I think we have to be prepared for an immediate disruption, and there are others where, as Andrew said, those that embrace AI, I think, and use it to their advantage, right, and become better and more creative, right, and smarter at doing their job, I think they will create a new industry and they will create new jobs of people that know how to work with AI to disrupt and change other markets. So there's definitely there's replacement on one hand. There's also displacement occurring at the same time, and there's the creation of new industries and new areas where AI will help flourish. Because again, we still have people on this planet. It's not just computers and robots running around. So we as humans, I think, always figure out a way to survive. And I'm sure that AI is only going to force us to create jobs for others and ways of sort of advancing together.
For the people that kind of get it and get on board. But you talked also about a group of people that may not be able to make that leap, and that could lead to significant social impact.
Sure. I think a good portion of the planet will not be on board, right? Mostly because they don't understand it. Right? You can't ask someone that has to make a decision on whether I put food on the table, right? Or I start reading a paper on ChatGPT or how to use ChatGPT. Like, that's not even an option, right? So most of the planet is not going to have a part in this decision-making process. They're just going to have to accept it. Right?
I think there's always been disruption. Any technology revolution has caused a lot of disruption, as the Industrial Revolution did, the IT computer revolution did. There are no typists in offices anymore because typewriters typists aren't needed. But that didn't lead to thousands of typists on the street begging or whatever. I think the market will adjust and people will find other things to do and adapt to the opportunities. So there will certainly be a lot of jobs that disappear. I don't believe that will lead to a lot of people not having jobs. I think their jobs will change. And as with any change, those people that choose to adapt or are good at adapting or have the opportunity and education to adapt will adapt. I think Armando makes a very good point that there is a significant issue that the global north has access to this technology in lots of ways and can create this technology. It costs a lot of money to build these large language models that underlie this technology. So there's a barrier to entry. Not every little startup can create its own large language model. And that means that we are increasing the divide between the haves and the have-nots in ways that is certainly one of the risks that this technology brings with us.
So with that in mind, clearly new technology or new industries are going to get spat out of this process. We talked a little bit about one of the issues being embellishment. It's very easy to say something, whether it's true or not, no one really knows. So what do you think could be created in terms of different types of products and softwares around that?
I think there's definitely an opportunity for, let's go back a little bit on how AI even comes about, right? The process of creating these models involves something we call training, right? So we train the models with real-world information. And the large language models that you're exposed to now in the media, when you talk about ChatGPT or GPT-4, et cetera, they have been trained on a lot of web content and a lot of information that includes tweets or social media posts or Wikipedia posts, et cetera. But the future will be all about the quality of the information that you use to train these models. And specifically, when you have domain problems like finance, right? If you want to optimize for investment decisions, or in healthcare, when you want to do medical diagnostics, there will be specialized training data. And these models, in order to be competitive, will become more and more specialized. So you'll have these sort of generally educated models, and then you'll have your specialized models that have kind of that master's degree or that PhD level degree. And I think there will be a great opportunity for humans, and us in general to become experts in certain areas, and maybe we are, but then with AI and technology, we're going to be able to educate these programs and educate these AIs to perform other tasks that are designed to solve specific problems in very specific domains. Right? So there isn't, I think, today, even in the short term, probably not even in the next 10 years, a general threat that there's this general AI that knows everything. Right? That's not going to happen. There will be many, many different AIs that will be trained by people, and there will be even ethical values, et cetera, that are defined by people and monitored by people. There will be security experts on AI programs, roles that didn't exist that have to monitor the AI's performances and try to hack the AI and for the purpose of preventing malicious uses. And so I think there's a massive security industry that will evolve, right? Both ethical as well as cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also this idea that there is like being human, and then there's the AI, and the AI is trying to catch up with being human like this. And I think that's not really a very helpful way to think about it. The AI, I'd use a very broad term, the AI in general, is already better, for example, if you have it in your Tesla, at keeping you between the two white lines on the road. It's already better than that, a lot better than humans than that, because it doesn't get distracted and all of the other reasons, that it doesn't get drunk, whatever. So statistically speaking, that primitive AI that's doing one job is already doing it better than humans are doing. And that will apply in more and more areas where the AI does a better job of synthesizing all of the inputs and working out what the best thing to do is, way faster than a human can do. And I think those things, as Armando says, the number of things where that applies will increase to the point where a specialist AI will be able to outperform in terms of the things that it knows and its ability to synthesize those things in interesting ways, will outperform expert humans quite quickly. I think the human role then becomes to look at the various suggestions the AI comes up with and decide which direction to go in and work out what to do. And I think for that, it will be a long, long time before the AI can compete with even thinking about what humans might want to do.
Mm. I think also in education, right, that's going to change the way kids are educated, because you won't start with a blank piece of paper anymore. The whole essay will be kind of spat out, and then you'll have to go through it, I guess, and prove or increase the truth level of it as a student. Do you think that's the way education will go?
Yeah, and at the same time, I think it's going to be dramatically geared towards personalization, right? Because one of the major problems we have in education is that not everybody learns the same way, right? And yet we force our kids to listen to certain people, certain curriculums, or certain ways of educating depending on where you come from. But some kids learn at a different pace. Some kids are more visual than others. Some kids need less interaction or more stimulation in certain areas. So I think AI is going to be tremendous for that, because it will adapt to the individual and it'll help convey messages of education in ways that really resonate with every one of us. That, I think, is going to be transformative.
This has changed. I mean, I always say, when I have this on me, I know everything, right? As long as I've got a signal, I know everything, because I can just look it up, right? And that access to information is, when I went to information school, they said, you have data and information and knowledge is information you have access to. Well, suddenly I have access to all of it. So that means, in principle, I know everything, right? That's no longer the constraint. The constraint is, how do I evaluate the interesting bits of information and the appropriate path to knowing something and to go towards guiding me to action. That then becomes way more valuable than, do I know something? Mm-hmm. Knowledge becomes like a commodity.
And yet, having access to everything isn't a good thing either, right? Because the problem we still have is we have an information overload society. Yeah. So we have way too much information. And so how do we access the right information at the right time, right? And we're talking about education. I remember my son kind of growing up in Spanish nursery, right? They had a certain way of teaching, and he just didn't adapt, and he didn't really like it, and it was always complaining about school. Changed him to a British system, which we thought would be better, and it got worse for a few years. And we're trying to figure out, why is it that he doesn't seem to like it, right? Or why is it that he doesn't seem to adapt? And it wasn't until there's one teacher, right? That one teacher that says he learns in a more visual way. Like he needs to see things and he needs to be more interactive and he needs to like try to do it by example, right? And we realized that what he really needed was someone that would inspire him and give him access to that right tool and that right technique to learn how to thrive. It's the same thing we have. We have access to so much information, but we don't know exactly how to use it and when to use it. So we're going to need a lot of tools that help us sift through the noise, that help us filter the information that we need when we need it, that will know us and know how we consume it, right? And that personalization component, again, comes back, not just in education, but it will be part of our professional lives. So the future is about the person, right? And it's a very human future, right? But assisted by technology that gets us.
That's brilliant. So a teacher can stand at the front of a class and say something, and it gets distributed to the kids in different ways, in a way that they prefer.
When you give an assignment, right, that assignment will change. It'll still be about learning history and about learning the main themes and topics, but it'll be taught in a different way. Doing homework will be doing personalized homework, right? Just like when it is to sift the internet these days. I think the phone is just the device, and then you'll have software that, I like 8-second messages, right? And you like 4-second messages, right? And you like short PowerPoints, and I like long papers when I'm on a weekend, right? It's the timing, and it's the place, and it's about knowing what and when to show to whom that will make you better, right? And it'll help you also absorb information faster while dealing with this information overload problem, which is massive, right? And I think without the right tools, the world that we live in will just get more and more complicated, right? But I think we need to narrow the AI or position the AI to help us deal with big data, to help us deal with noise reduction, and help us generate insights that really make a difference depending on the type of problem we have in hand.
Yeah.
I don't think the future of teaching involves a teacher standing up telling people stuff. It's going to look different.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to say to the audience, if you do have questions, shout out at any time or put your hand out at any time. It's not something... Oh yeah, go for it.
What about IP rights? Because at the moment you can't protect what you create with AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and I think we're also going through a disruption in law and in legal processes. There is no current precedent, right? Like legal precedent around training data and who owns if you were to train a model based on publicly available information, like who owns the model? Obviously, the companies that build the model will say they own it. Now you have news outlets and publishers saying that, well, we should have a piece of it. So it's not clear yet, right, as to exactly how this will work. So we'll need to come up with new laws to deal with it. But it's at the very nature of the internet, right, that if you make something publicly available, and again, this is just my personal opinion, right? If you make something purposely publicly available and you have others that use it to derive or create something different, right, then there is, inherently there's a transfer of rights there. But, artists would disagree, right? Especially when you start to think about paintings and you start thinking about copyrights in books and exactly what is considered derived and different. It gets very difficult very, very fast, right? And especially when you have generative AI that produces texts that look very, very different, right? But they look like humans would have written those. So how do you protect that, right? I still, in a nutshell, believe that whoever creates the technology should be held responsible for it, right? As the only way out for now, but time will tell.
Yeah, I think there's already a few interesting lawsuits. Getty Images, I think, have a lawsuit pending about their images being used to create these models, and those images were not in public domain. They were behind paywalls and things. So there are some issues here which the industry will have to work through. The legal folks will have to work through. I think it's going to be a long while before that's sorted out.
Well, that leads us nicely actually into the next topic, which is the next bombshell, which is the moratorium. I don't know who's heard about the moratorium, but obviously it sounds like this is from the tech billionaires who missed out on the AI boom and have decided everyone's got to put it on hold so they can catch up. But what do you guys think about this concept of moratorium? So the kind of regulatory side or the ethical side can catch up with what's happening in the technology?
Well, first of all, it's a non-starter. I mean, it's however much it would be nice to say, let's put it back in the box and think about it again before we open the box again. That's not going to happen. And so, whilst I am a very strong advocate for us taking the time to think about the ethical frameworks we need and the privacy issues, there's a whole range of questions that this technology raises that we should urgently be spending time thinking about and talking about. Yeah, we can't switch it off and then think about it. Also because I think only by, unfortunately to some extent, only by us letting this out a little bit and discovering where it goes, will we be able to regulate. We need to get faster and better at regulating quickly. And given how long it took us to sort out tax havens, I'm not super optimistic about this. The moratorium is a non-starter.
Yeah, I mean, as an American, I mean, we can't even get gun control taken care of. I just can't see AI control being a thing. But in principle, there are some real threats, right? And there's some legitimate claims as to why we should take it easy, right? And I think one of the bigger concerns is the spread of misinformation, right? Because it's become so easy now to impersonate humans with the AI, and if you plug them into the internet and to social media, with a very simple program, you can run a campaign that spreads misinformation about elections and spreads misinformation about politics and or even inflammatory information, including images, right? There was a recent one on the arrest of Donald Trump, a fake message or with a fake photo of such an arrest taking place, and many people believed it, right? And now imagine Dali with the ability to create many different photos that show various different stages of a invented or fake event, and then you start spreading that out. I think you can create real civil havoc, right?
Deep fake videos are to the point where they're indistinguishable from, you can have a talking head of somebody appearing to say something and high quality HD video, which sounds like them, looks like them, is indistinguishable on a TV or on a small phone, indistinguishable from them actually saying it. That's completely fake. And that does raise huge issues that we need to quickly get our heads around.
But it isn't necessarily caused by, the language models, right? I mean, we've had this technology for a long time. It's just gotten, a lot better in recent years. The problem will be, I think, especially with social media, right? The concept of this wild, wild west of, anybody, anytime, anonymously can comment and chat, I think is dead.
It's dead.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's over, right? We won't be able to go online because it is the wild, wild west. You won't know if it's really people that you're talking to or that you're reading about. So you'll need verification. You'll need certification. This blue badge is not a trend. It's a must, right? And we will start also only talking to or networking with people that we know, right? And then we'll create private networks, much more so than public networks, that the ones we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years. Right? I don't even think they've been good for us, right? As in, I think we all have our reservations as to what they've done to us and they're doing to our kids. But I do think that there will be a rise in private networks where you start to share information and collect information or consume information from people you know or brands that you believe in or that you care about. So the world becomes a little smaller, but I think it'll be safer, right, to operate under those domains.
I totally agree. I think the days of the anonymous internet are coming to an end. Yeah.
And so you said the responsibility then, I mean, it's a big question of responsibility, but that lies with the technology producer for these kind of things, the person that came up with the technology, or? Where do responsibilities
I always
lie?
think the platforms have got off very lightly and are gradually starting to realize they're going to have to take more responsibility. If you're a platform and you're allowing people to anonymously do things, then you have to share some of the responsibility for that. And I think that is going to happen. It's going to come around one way or the other. And I think that the platforms will respond by, exactly as Armando says, by moving this away from this anonymous approach towards something where people have identities, whatever they are. And then you're in the space where you have a more traditional approach to taking responsibility for what appears. As in the person who wrote it and the person who published it, in some way share responsibility.
I think there's certainly more responsibility on the person that uses the technology, right? Because creating the technology is one thing, and if it's created for purposes like productivity, right, or improving the workplace or improving certain jobs, it was designed for a certain purpose, but there will be people that take that technology and use it for other reasons, right, and to cause harm. I think that the responsibility is on the individual that decides to use the AI or the group that uses that technology for malicious reasons, right? Not the designer of the technology, right? But if you operate a business, then of course you need to, do your part, right, to prevent especially in misinformation, to prevent the spread of misinformation. But again, we've seen how difficult it is, right? There's a limit as to how so much one can do, and I think what is happening today, and that is to verify individuals and to basically remove the anonymity, is a good step forward.
And OpenAI, I said this to you before when we were talking, OpenAI were surprised by the take-up of ChatGPT. They expected it would be another large language model-based technology that they would sort of throw out there and the AI geeks would pay attention to it, but nobody else. And suddenly it went viral, had like 10 million users by the end of the weekend. And they didn't expect that, and therefore they hadn't addressed any of these larger societal issues that come with it, because they weren't expecting to be confronted with them quite so fast. So they are trying to do the right thing. They are a little bit sort of Silicon Valley. We will do whatever we can do, and then we'll work it out, which is, sometimes when you're working on a global level is not the smartest approach necessarily. But they're now sort of tracking back and they are genuinely, I think, trying to do the right thing. And certainly Google is, one of the reasons Google has stumbled and gone more slowly on this than the others is that they have reputational risk there that they need to, when they do something, it needs to have more of that baked in. And I think people are, the big vendors are trying to address it.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, pharmaceuticals or food industries, you've got to go a long way to get regulated before people can consume your product. But here, ChatGPT can throw something out and it can affect people's minds in many ways.
That's a really good analogy. I think the digital world has got off regulation-free for a long time, and I think this is starting, these waves of all-pervasive use of these kind of technologies will trigger a regulatory sort of backlash in some way. Backlash in a good way.
At some point I thought that we were all, especially when the European Union started enforcing data privacy regulation and like let's protect people's data and all that, I was actually quite excited that Europe was taking the lead on looking into what big companies are doing with personal data, right? But then I became really disappointed when, sure, we've got all these like different disclaimers and people have to accept cookies and everyone just clicks accept, accept, accept. They don't care at the end, right? They just want the service, right? Yeah. So it's disappointing that society is just, willing to give up their data without knowing how it's going to be used for the sake of an immediate service. So that's already a bad sign, I think. And I asked the question earlier about whether you're using some AI or ChatGPT for your jobs, and most people are not. But by the end of next month, they will, right? And it's because it'll make them better. And despite all the talk and all the the different fears and threats and sort of even moral or ethical issues that people might see with it, right? Or regulation or threat of regulation or whatever, it's just going to make you more productive and more efficient. So,
And there is a question as to what informed consent means. When they ask, we need informed consent in order to do this. So is it okay if we do this? And you're asking it knowing that the person's doesn't understand the implications of saying yes, right? Even if they did read it, it's not something that the average person would have the time to get their heads around. So there are serious issues around what does informed consent mean in this kind of space.
Yeah.
Why don't we develop technology which exactly manages that problem for us?
and we will, but we will still debate as to what that technology should do and how it should do it.
And it just manages your profile accordingly.
Some people don't believe they should be profiled, right? Some people don't believe it should be centralized, right? So there are a lot of different challenges, even in designing and accepting a design for such a technology.
The question is, who would have access to your profile, for example, right? Now, you might want, in one sense, you want everyone to have access to your profile because you want personalization everywhere. On the other hand, you don't want anyone owning your profile so that they can bombard you with adverts or know what you're going to die of or any of these other issues, right? So it's complex. It's not a matter of I want my I just make my profile and it should just work out all the details because.
But it's a full balance because we have the right to ask every database to give all the data and delete it. So you can balance. The balance of power is not only on the guys where you say accept, you put an accept between accept everything. You can hit back. You can say, hey, give me data, delete my data, do this and this, and that. And they will stop collecting your data because it's too strenuous.
And some of these have been solved really well. I mean, India has done a really good job of a universal ID system across, which is owned by the government. It's not owned by a big corp. So there are different ways of balancing this, but. We need to get on with it instead of talking about, yes, we could solve it.
You also mentioned that ChatGPT or AI will be used by many people in the workplace soon. Right now, the reason why I wouldn't like to use this is because I don't really trust the information that is presented there. And I would say this is one of the biggest issues right now, that you don't really know what is true, just like you don't know initially who has written it. It's a little bit the question that was asked before the IP rights. I don't know who has written it. Is it true or not? How true is it? Sometimes ChatGPT seems to be hallucinating a little bit. Also, I'm wondering some AI input in your models, for example. How do you make sure that all the input goes into it, produces true results?
I think truth is an important aspect of it, and I think it's easy to forget that this was basically a demo, right? This thing, the whole ChatGPT thing, was basically built as a demo. It wasn't designed to be a product quite yet, and already they have. They have already developed a plugin architecture, which is super interesting, potentially game-changing, where the ChatGPT can actually go and ask for sources of information. It can do flight bookings. It can go and check facts about the solar system and about basic science and physics. It can check your hotel bookings. So there is a lot of development still to be done in getting more trust in the truth of what it says. That piece for a long time wasn't taken seriously, but I think suddenly, because it's being used and not just a demo, people are starting to work out how that can be solved. And it's not super hard to work out how to do that.
Yeah, I think you just need to go back and remember that ChatGPT is just one of many that are coming, right? It was just an example of what a generative AI can do. But the moment you start applying that to specific databases, that's when it's going to add significant value for different types of problems. And just in finance alone, right? Bloomberg released a paper describing Bloomberg GPT, and they've created their own model based mostly on public data, but a lot of it on financial data. It's like a third of the size of GPT-4. But nonetheless, it's the first kind of domain-specific exposure you get. And you're going to see that same technology applied to news and current event and current information, so that when you're asking questions about something that is happening right now or something that happened very recently, the corpus that it uses to learn or the corpus that it uses to query can be based on Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Dow Jones, sources that you trust, or publications that you read. And the model will produce results that are based more in line with your thinking, your morals, your values, your understanding of the world. So there's room for us, right? As in deciding how do we build the best AI for us and for our business, or for our kids, or for our education. And it's going to be a pick and choose, and it's going to be a design, build your own, right? In every single sense. The generative AI will be that sort of general wild, wild west, right, environment. But most people will not use it.
And that's a good point about new information, because I just found out today that ChatGPT only does information up to 2021.
September, yeah.
September 24. So everything after that, it doesn't know.
It'll tell you it does, but it doesn't.
It'll hallucinate for sure.
I mean, something truly, let's say, human is innovation and creativity. And so I wonder if, let's say, those models are fed with the whole database of patents, for example, which is kind of the pinnacle of innovation in a sense. Back to the 1900s, do you think those kind of models will get, in a sense, innovative and creative as well, similar on a human level?
I don't know what creative means. I sometimes have ideas that come from out of the blue. I don't know where they came from. It's just an idea. Clearly, I've had lots of input, and somehow some things, the things have clunked together somehow, and I've had an idea. I like to think that's me being creative. I'm not sure what it actually means. So in terms of can the AI be creative, it already is being creative, right? I mean, the DeepMind is doing protein folding in innovative ways, suggesting new molecules that might be interesting, which is actually way more creative than most chemicals were. Like, Post-it notes were invented by accident. Sellotape was invented by accident, right? So these weren't creative things. These were people messing about and coming up with something and then finding and thinking, oh, that could be useful for something else. And I think the creative process, we like to be mystical about it, but actually it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of collecting lots of data and synthesizing it, and AI is really good at that. The creative bit I don't think it will be good at will be, the creative arts and sort of having. The interesting thing about art is you create a piece of art with a message, with something you were thinking when you created it or when the artist created it. That's interesting. Why were they doing that? What were they thinking when they created that? That's what makes the art interesting, not the actual thing that they've created. And that they're not going to do, because they don't have any deep thoughts that they're trying to get out into the open, right?
I would disagree. I think we have proof now with, Dali is a great example, right, of it literally prompting it a message, right? Mm-hmm. And it could be a mix of whatever you want it, and the images that come out can be quite extraordinary. And of course, many of them might not be to your liking, they might be bad, but there is 1 out of 10 that comes out that you're like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. I can't even think of anyone that has ever come up with something like that.
I would argue you're being creative with the prompt, and all it's doing is it's just like the paint, right? It's just a message. It's a medium.
It's the same prompt. Imagine it's the same prompt, just pressing enter multiple times, right? And it just keeps producing many variations of it. Eventually, I think there's a collection of people that would agree that it is artistic, or there's a collection of people that identify themselves with the art, that ultimately determine that it's a valuable art, right? And there's absolutely room for AI to be part of this movement. Now, how much value there will be? I bet you that there will be AIs that will be worth millions, right? Because there will be some trend, or it will be fashionable, or someone will, dump the AI in the metro, and the AI has a little robot and starts graffitiing, a wall that nobody ever has done, and it comes up with something really timely, right? And eventually it becomes pop culture. Right? There's always effectively the right time and the right place for something artistic to emerge, and it doesn't have to be human.
Because one One of the most interesting pieces of art I have seen recently at the Museum of Modern Art was from Rafik Anadol, who uses AI to generate images, and it's not generated by him.
Yeah, but they also use a paintbrush. But you don't pretend that the paintbrush has created the painting, right?
No. It's purely, there's no paintbrush whatsoever involved.
No, but I'm saying when a traditional painter uses a paintbrush, we don't say that the paintbrush is creative, right? It's the person behind it that's driving the machine. The machine in this case is a paintbrush or it's an AI. And the AI can definitely create amazing art, but it will be, in my opinion, it will be a person choosing one of the 1,000 suggestions that comes up and directing it in that direction, say, that's what I want to say, that's what's interesting. That's what's interesting about art.
We've trained a model around patents and IP. And one of the things that's been quite interesting, we're using it on the creative side, but the way we've had to train it is when we ask a question at the moment, we don't really include the intent. But actually, by training the model to ask questions back, we can actually help it to define the intent of what we're trying to say, which is often when you think about creativity. So actually, when you try and train it to ask the intent, ask the right questions, you get the answer much quicker. So we're writing patterns this way.
Any other questions?
Let's forget about the word true and talk about maybe like GPT-5, right, as an example, right? So we're only looking at text today. We're looking at a little bit of images, but now we're going to be looking at audio, and we're going to be looking at video, right? And that's going to enhance our understanding of the world. We're also going to be able to mix and match all these different sources of media to produce new ways of thinking to some extent. And then we're going to start hooking this AI to the real world, right? Which means that it'll have access to sensors, and it'll have access to robotics, and it'll have access to machinery, and so on and so forth. So that will have a significant impact. So as a result of this network growing and accessing more information, I think it'll develop its intelligence more and more. And it'll be exponential, right? As in the next 2 to 3 years, I think it'll be, the progress we've seen now is nothing compared to the progress we'll see next year. And the progress in 3 years from now is going to be significantly changing of industries. And you'll see that every year for the next 10 years, right? So it'll be 10 years of rapid change where some people will call it the true AI, the AGI, the God AI. I mean, there'll be all sorts of names for it. But what's, I think, true is that the impact will be dramatic.
Yeah, I think it's probably not helpful to think of it as a binary thing. Like AI is there and it's not very good, and then suddenly it's done. Like that's it. It's now true AI is suddenly there. It's not going to be like that, right? It's going to get gradually better. The idea that we have in our heads is that we have true AI when it's got to as good as humans, but there's no reason why it should stop us as good at humans, right? For many tasks, it can already go past humans. It can go past humans for more and more tasks and be better and better at them. So it'll be a long journey, and it's going to go faster, as Armando says. It's going to go faster and get more impressive. I think there are some fundamental research questions still to be solved that will feed into the process, and but there are still some very fundamental issues that mean that this path is not going to lead automatically without that to AGI. But yeah, it's going to be everywhere, and it's going to speed up, and it's going to become everything that we do.
There are examples of AI actually being better than humans, and just in our space, right? If you think about algorithmic trading, right? When was the last time you called someone to make a trade, right? Since 2007, right? I recall selling to market makers in the tri-state area data that was feeding into algos that would make decisions automatically on whether to either buy to create liquidity, right, or sell to remove risk based on current events. So being plugged in directly into macroeconomic feeds, plugged into real-time news wires, and these already feeding into the algorithms and being autonomous at deciding how to pace their trades. And this has replaced trading. Like it doesn't as in humans don't and shouldn't be doing it, right? Because you get a much more efficient trade done through an algorithm, right? But this has been around for more than 10 years. And investing is being replaced, specifically in public markets. It's being replaced and has been replaced in a good part of the equity market, right? With automated AIs that have been trained to learn real-world factors and make decisions on our behalf, right? So there's many areas like this that have been around for a long time. We just didn't notice it or didn't want to.
Yeah.
And we'll just be more conscious of it now.
Yeah.
Your car and your phone and your house are all full of technology that's making better decisions than you would in lots of ways. Yeah, it's happening already.
I thought it would be interesting just to get a feel from everybody what they're thinking about all of this, whether you feel good about it or worried about it. So maybe if we could get a show of hands of people that feel very positive and excited about these developments. Okay, that's good. That's more than I thought, actually. Who feels anxious and worried? Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Look, guys, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I think, I've done a lot of these things, but it's not often you see everyone's faces fully engaged the whole way through. So thank you so much. Thanks to the audience for the questions.